Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Yevamot. We are up to Perek Yud Bet Mishnah Vav. Today's Mishnayot should be Leilu Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana, Aranbayev, and Eliyahu ben Burcha Israel, and Chana bat Miriam, Menuchatam began Eden, Amen, and Avdi ben Chaim lechaim, with the Refuah Shenemav, Daniel Shom ben Rosa, and Mariana Miriam Chaya bat Tamara betor Shah Chulei Israel. This Mishnah gives a step-by-step description of the Chalitza procedure. The Mishnah begins, Mitzvat Chalitza, the mitzvah of Chalitza is performed as follows. Bahu vivimto lebedin, the Yavam and his Yevamot come to the court, Vehen masin lo etzah ogenet lo, and the judges give him advice appropriate for him as to whether he should do Yibum or Chalitza. For example, if there is a significant difference in age between him and the Yevamah, they advise him to do Chalitza. If they are far apart in age, they will likely argue a lot and the marriage will not be a happy one, as Rashi says from the Gemara on page 101b. And Yevamot, therefore, they would advise him to do Chalitza. If not, they advise him to do Yibum. This is because performing Yibum is the bigger mitzvah, as we saw in chapter 4, Mishnah 5. Shenemau, the source for this practice is as it is stated in the Torah in reference to Chalitza in Sefer Dvarim, chapter 25, verse 8. V'kar'u lo ziknei iro v'diberu elav. And the elders of his city shall call the Yavam, and they shall speak to him, meaning give him the proper advice. The verse could have said, and they shall speak, without the words to him, because the verse has just said that the elders call him to come to the court. So it's obvious that the speaking is also to him. The extra words to him teach that the judges should advise him to do what is good for him. If the Yavam decides to go ahead with Chalitza, the actual Chalitza ceremony begins. V'yomeret, and the Yevamah says the following verse, in verse 7, Me'en Yivami la'akim la'achiv shem b'Yisrael lo avaya b'mi. My Yavam refuses to establish a name for his brother in Israel. He is not willing to take me in Yibum. In this verse, this statement is preceded by the words, and she says, implying that the Yevamah says this statement. V'omer, and the Yavam says the following verse, Lo chafatzi lekachta, I do not want to marry her. In the verse, this phrase is preceded by the phrase, and he stands and says, implying that it must be said by the Yavam, u'bilshon hakodesh hayu omrim, and they would say these passages in the holy tongue in Hebrew, meaning they must use the exact words of the verse as quoted in the Mishnah. The Mishnah in Sotah, chapter 7, Mishnah 4, learns this from another verse. The ceremony then continues with the actions described in the following verse, in verse 9. V'niksha yivimto elav, then his Yevamah shall approach him le'enei azkenim, before the eyes of the elders, v'chaltza na'alo me'araglo, and she shall remove his shoe from upon him, v'yalka befanav, and spit in front of him. Ro kanireh ladayanim, this verse also teaches that the Yevamah should spit an amount of spittle that is large enough to be visible to the judges. The phrase before the eyes of the elders refers to the spitting mentioned later in the verse and teaches that the elders must be able to see the spittle. The ceremony continued with the final statement by the Yevamah as described by the following verse in verse 9. V'anta v'amra kacha ya'aseh le'ish asher lo yivneh et bet achiv. And she, the Yevamah, shall declare and say, so shall be done to the man who will not build the house of his brother. This too, she says in Hebrew with the actual words of the verse. The Mishnah describes the procedure of saying the verses changed over the course of time. Ad kan hayu makrin. Originally, the courts used to dictate to the Yavam and Yevamah the verses they needed to say only until this point, but no further. Meaning they dictated only the passage shall be his brother's house for the Yevamah's final recitation, but not the next verse in the Chalitza chapter and his name. This is because biblically, this verse is not part of the Yevamah's declaration. Rather, the verse is describing a different declaration, like the Mishnah will explain later. וכשיקרא רבי אורקנוס תחת האלה בכפר איתם וגמר את כל הפרשה, but when Rabbi Orkinus dictated the Chalitza passages under the elm tree in the village of Etam and completed the whole chapter, even the verse in his name shall be called. Rabbi Orkinus once presided over a Chalitza in the village of Etam, and he had the Yevamah say the final verse in the Chalitza chapter as well, even though it was not biblically required, which the Yevamah then repeated after him. It became the established custom of all courts to complete the whole chapter in their dictation to the Yevamah. The conclusion of the Chalitza ceremony is described in the following verse: V'nikra shemo b'Yisrael bet chalutz hanal, and his name shall be called in Israel the house of the one whose shoe was removed. Mitzvah b'dayanin, this means that it is a mitzvah for the judges to proclaim the words chalutz hanal, the one whose shoe was removed. V'lo mitzvah b'talmidim, but it is not a mitzvah for the students who are sitting in front of their teacher at the ceremony to say it. Rabbi Yehuda says, mitzvah al kol ha'omdim sham lomar, it is a mitzvah for all those standing there to say, chalutz hanal, chalutz hanal, chalutz hanal. the one whose shoe was removed, the one whose shoe was removed, the one whose shoe was removed. Although biblically they need only say the one whose shoe was removed one time, the rabbis instituted that it be repeated 3 times to publicize the matter. And that is the end of chapter 12, Mishnah 6. We continue now with chapter 13, Mishnah 1. Under Torah law, a girl who is not yet an adult can be married off only by her father. She cannot get married on her own, nor can any of her other relatives marry her off. If her father dies and she wants to marry, she has to wait until she reaches adulthood when she can enter into a marriage on her own. However, seeing that a young girl with no father might be abused by others, the rabbis allowed her mother or adult brothers to marry her off in a rabbinic marriage to a husband who will protect her, as the Gemara explains on page 112b in Masechet Yevamot. As part of this decree, the rabbis gave the young girl in this kind of rabbinic marriage the ability to leave her marriage without receiving a get, but simply through mi'un, refusal. To perform mi'un, the orphan girl simply makes a statement that she no longer desires to be with her husband and her marriage is dissolved. Mi'un works only while the orphan girl is still a child. Once she reaches adulthood, without having performed mi'un, the marriage can be dissolved only through a regular divorce, a get. This Mishnah records several disagreements between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel regarding the laws of mi'un. The first disagreement. Beit Shammai say, En mema'anin el arusot. Only girls in the erusin stage of marriage can make mi'un, but not those who have completed their marriage with nisuin. Beit Shammai were afraid that allowing mi'un to be done even after a couple completes their marriage would hurt an orphan girl's chance of getting married. Beit Hillel say arusot u'nisuot. Both those in the erusin stage and those in the nisuin stage can make mi'un. A wedding dinner arranged and paid for by the husband was typically held at the time of nisuin. Beit Shammai were concerned that a man might not be willing to spend money to prepare a wedding for himself and his orphan bride when she could end the marriage at any time with a simple statement of mi'un. Beit Hillel, on the other hand, felt that both the girl and the husband want to marry, even if there's a chance that the marriage will only be temporary, and there is no reason to fear that the husband will hold back from entering into the marriage. The second disagreement concerns an orphan girl whose husband dies without children. She now falls to her husband's brother for yibum. The Mishnah discusses whether or not mi'un can then be used to dissolve the yibum bond that connects her to the yavam. Beit Shammai amrim babal. Beit Shammai said that mi'un can be used to refuse a husband during his lifetime, velo bi'avam, but it cannot be used after the husband's death with the yavam. According to Beit Shammai, once the husband dies and the girl falls for yibum, mi'un cannot break the yibum bond between her and her yavam. If she wants to be free of the yavam so that she can marry someone else, she has to wait until she becomes an adult and then perform chalitza with him. An underage girl cannot perform chalitza, as the Gemara says on page 105b in Masechet Yevamot. Beit Hillel omrim babal ubayavam, but Beit Hillel disagree and say that mi'un may be made both with the husband and the yavam. Beit Hillel's view is that mi'un made with the yavam retroactively erases the orphan's girl's original marriage to the yavam's brother. Once that first marriage has been dissolved, there is no yibum ban attaching the girl to the yavam, and she is free to marry anyone, as the Gemara explains on page 107b. Now, according to Beit Hillel, when the girl makes mi'un to the yavam and says that she does not want to be married to him, she is also rejecting her original marriage to the yavam's brother. It is as if she is saying, now that my marriage to my original husband is attaching me to his brother, I no longer want that original marriage. The third disagreement concerns whether mi'un must be made directly to the husband. Beit Shammai say that mi'un must be made in the husband's presence. Beit Shammai reasoned that a girl may be too embarrassed to reject her husband to his face. Therefore, they require mi'un to be done in front of him as a way of discouraging her from making mi'un. But Beit Hillel say that mi'un may be made in his presence or out of his presence. A fourth disagreement concerns the need for a beddin for mi'un. Beit Shammai amrim bebeddin. Beit Shammai say that mi'un must be done in front of a beddin of 3 expert judges, meaning judges that have received special smicha, ordination from their teachers, who in turn receive smicha from their teachers in an unbroken chain going back to Moshe Rabbeinu. This was a special form of smicha that was discontinued centuries ago. It is not to be confused with the rabbinic ordination that we currently refer to as smicha. Beit Hillel say that mi'un may be done in front of a beddin of expert judges, or not in front of such a beddin. Beit Hillel do, however, agree that mi'un must be performed in front of 3 people, even if they are not expert judges. A fifth disagreement concerns the number of times a girl may make mi'un. אמרו להן בית הלל לבית שמאי, בית הלל said to בית שמאי, ממאנת והיא קטנה, a girl may make miyun while she is a child, אפילו 4 ו5 פעמים, even 4 or 5 times. According to בית הלל, there is no limit to the number of times an orphan girl may be married and then refuse her husband through miyun. אמרו להן בית שמאי said to בית הלל, this is not so. And benot Yisrael hefker, the daughters of the nation of Israel, are not to be treated like ownerless property. It is not proper for a Jewish girl to change hands from one husband to the next again and again. Similar to an ownerless property that can be picked up and dropped repeatedly by anyone at any time. Rather, Beit Shammai say she may make miyun to one husband and then she must wait before entering into erusin with another man until she becomes an adult, at which time she may accept kiddushin on her own and become married on a biblical level, and miyun will no longer be possible. Or if she wants, she may make miyun to one husband, and then if she wants to marry again while she is still a child, she may marry and immediately enter into nisuin. In this way, the marriage will have greater permanence, since according to Beit Shammai, what they ruled after Nisuin, miyun may no longer be made. As the Rav explains to us. And that is the end, Rabotai, of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.